I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Destin City Council for June 19. Is Pastor John Skiles in the audience? I haven't seen him. If not, if I could have everyone stand for a moment of silence. Mr. Marler, would you lead us in the pledge?
Yes, ma'am. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council, is there any items that you would like to move on the agenda or change?
Mayor, I would like to pull item C for further discussion on the consent agenda. Just that one.
Mayor,
Yes.
did we want to move number 7A up to proclamations under number A?
Yes. If I could ask a member of the council to do that for me.
Moved.
Second. Okay. Do we need to take a formal vote on that or consensus? Okay. We've had a request. I had a motion. Do we have a second? Yes. We have a motion. We have a second to move consent item A.
Let's see.
And,
A
yeah, to pull C, and we're going to move A to item number 2. All those in favor, please vote yes. Unanimous, yes. I heard that just a little bit. Did any other council members want any other changes to the agenda? Move to the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion or changes?
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any discussion? If not, I call for the question. Unanimous, yes. I have a proclamation this evening honoring Nancy Weidenhammer. One of the many things people admire about Nancy is her unselfishness, and willingness to take part in various volunteer groups and committees. The passion and devotion continuously shown through Nancy's actions should be an inspiration to us all. A champion is defined as one who fights for a cause, and Nancy is a true champion of service. She is truly a gem in our community, and tonight we are honoring her with a proclamation. Nancy is ill and cannot attend tonight's meeting, but her husband, Tom, is in the audience, and maybe other members of the family, and I'd like to ask them to please meet me at the podium, if they would, for the proclamation. Whereas Nancy's involvement in this community has benefited not just the lives of those she touches, but the very fabric of Destin. She has tackled a number of Destin issues and accomplished sustainable results. And whereas, after moving to Destin in 1990, Nancy began volunteering locally by teaching literacy to adults in Destin when she became extremely aware of the plight of those with little or no ability to speak English and having a difficult time of keeping a job. And whereas Nancy chaired the city's Public Works and Safety Committee and was the vice chair of the Harbor District Community Redevelopment Agency Advisory Committee, and whereas in July 2012, Nancy received the City of Destin's Community Service Award for her vision and leadership in the construction of the Destin's first and only dog park. She spearheaded a fundraising campaign, led a team of 30 supporters, to seek donations, and in less than 4 months collected $38,927, exceeding the team's goal by 84%. The City Council matched the community's donation, and the dog park was opened in January of 2012. And whereas in February 2014, the Volunteer Florida CEO presented the Volunteer Florida Champion of Service Award to Nancy for all of her efforts improving the Destin community in a variety of ways since 1990. Whatever the cause, Nancy consistently fights with dedication, determination, persistence, and the unselfish desire to make Destin a better place. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Destin Mayor and City Council that June 19, 2017 be designated as Nancy Weidenhammer Day in the City of Destin. Her active role improving Destin through community-driven efforts have greatly enhanced Destin and will benefit its residents and visitors for many years to come. So done this 19th day of June 2017. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Nancy had an opportunity to read this ahead of time, thanks to Ray. And she wants to express her deep appreciation for this proclamation, and the family sincerely thanks you. Nancy has always had a passion to help the community in which she lives and has not only devoted time and effort to the city of Destin, but also many years of service to charitable organizations to help those in need. Again, I thank you very much for this proclamation, and she thanks you also. She is deeply appreciative.
Thank you, and thanks for all your service.
Mayor, then we have the resolution.
Yes, we are moving consent resolution 1732. Do we need to read that by title?
Want to do the honors, Mayor, on this one? Yes.
We don't need to do this by title, do we?
I'll go ahead and read it. Just,
Okay, go ahead.
Resolution
Please.
17-32, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Destin naming the Destin Dog Park the Nancy Weidenhammer Dog Park.
Ms. Lejeune, you want to do background on this?
Yes, sir. What I can do, sir, is read the body of the resolution. Whereas the City Council has conducted a public meeting to consider naming the Destin Dog Park the Nancy Weidenheimer Hammer Dog Park, and whereas in July 2012, Nancy received the City of Destin Community Service Award for her vision and leadership in the construction of Destin's first and only dog park. And whereas, known throughout the community as Destin Dog, Nancy spearheaded a fundraising campaign to construct a dog park after City Council offered the land but was unable to fund it. Whereas Nancy led a team of 30 supporters to seek donations and in less than 4 months collected over $38,000, exceeding the team's goal by 84%. And whereas council matched the community's donations and the dog park was constructed and opened in January 2012. And whereas Nancy has continued to raise funds for additional improvement to the dog park, and whereas Nancy is truly an inspiration to many, her active role improving Destin through community-driven efforts have greatly enhanced Destin and will benefit its residents and visitors for many years to come.
Council, could I have a motion?
I would offer one.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Braden, Councilmember Braden was first.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make the recommended motion to move the City Council approve Resolution 17-32, renaming the Destin Dog Park the Nancy Weidenhammer Dog Park.
Second. Councilmember Ramsdell, did you have anything additional? Second, okay. I have a motion, I have a second. Could we take the vote, please? Unanimous, yes. Tom, thanks for you and having your family attending and being with us tonight for this. It's an honor and a pleasure to be able to proudly announce the Nancy Weidenheimer Dog Park. Thank you. If you don't mind, would you mind coming up to the microphone and turning it on for us so everyone can hear you?
I want to thank, and Nancy will find it a great honor for the resolution that you have passed. I thank you very much for the recognition.
Thank you, and again, thanks for the service for all of your family to the city of Destin. Thank you. I have difficulty not calling him mayor, but thank you. I have difficulty not calling him mayor, but tonight we'll call him past mayor and member of the Florida legislature, Mel Ponder. The floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Ms. Lejeune. It's an honor to be here. I'm not used to being on this side, but I just want to honor the time that you gave me, Mayor Fisher, and I won't be too long. But just want to give a quick update on this past session in Tallahassee. First, it was an amazing honor to serve you over in Tallahassee. I don't take my job over there lightly. By all means, I would kind of kid around and thought that I prayed a lot before I went to Tallahassee. But you spend a little more time on your knees over there, that's for sure. I want to thank Mayor Fisher for coming over and visiting me during session. I appreciate that. Ms. Ramsdell came over as well. Thank you for taking time to come out. Ms. Lejeune, I spoke with several times throughout session, just needing input. You know, being a former mayor and coming from this side of the fence, a lot of bills that they tried to push through the system did have an effect on communities and cities, and so I would actually counsel with Ms. Lejeune as well as Mr. Beatty over in Fort Walton, and then the League of Cities as well throughout the session, and just to make sure that I kind of fully understood all angles of a bill. And Surprisingly, Northwest Florida League, thanks to Mayor Fisher and others, y'all gave me the distinction of being the Legislator of the Year. And so I was really honored by that for Northwest Florida. And for that, I don't know if it was one of those things where everybody kind of said, all right, who wants to win? And they all backed up, and I was the only one, still standing. But it was an honor to win. But session was interesting. It was, coming from a position, Mayor Fisher, that you sit in now, to that situation in Tallahassee, I got to kind of ease in the best I can, but I thought we did a good job this year. It was a very transformative year for ethics and transformation. And for me, going over there working in that environment didn't really bother me that much because I felt like that's kind of who I was to begin with. And so for some people that had been around, that was a big shift for them. But for me, I felt it was kind of just going into the shallow end of the pool. So it was an honor to kind of go in under the leadership we did have to bring about sweeping change from an ethics perspective. From a member standpoint, I thought that was good. But we passed an $84 billion budget. One of the biggest things, as you all know now, obviously, it was when I ran, was the BP oil spill money. All of us were affected greatly, especially as a city, tremendously, from tourism and as well as from an economic standpoint. We took it on the chin. And so when I campaigned, one of the biggest things people would say is, hey, Mel, just get us the money. Because as you all know, there was one bucket of money that we thought Northwest Florida would get the lion's share of, but it ended up being distributed evenly. And so this was the big, I guess, final bucket coming our way. And so thankfully the delegation of Northwest Florida came together, and we're all appointed to a committee, and we passed a bill, went to the floor, passed unanimous, went to the Senate. Senate came around about 3 or 4 weeks later. It passed unanimous. We worked out the details. We got a final product, and it again passed both houses unanimous. That money will start July 1st, thankfully. The governor signed that. So we'll have $300 million that will come to Northwest Florida to the 8 counties starting July 1st. How we worded the bill, actually thanks to Senator Gaynor, was within 30 days of the next trail of money coming in from 2019 to 2033. That within 30 days, that money's got to be transferred over to Northwest Florida. So I think we've kind of set it up so not only we get to the $300 million up front, but the next $1.2 billion behind it should hopefully come right away to Northwest Florida. And so that, to me, is a game changer. We took out some of the economic incentives out of that bill, but it's strong with infrastructure, which one of the things that I know when I talk to Mayor Fisher as well as Ms. Lejeune is things like the Crosstown Connector and things where I know Destin's got true infrastructure needs. Stormwater, water systems is part of that. Hardscapes, there's a lot of things I think the city of Destin could benefit greatly from that money. How it's broken down is each of the 8 counties will get 5%. $15 million of those first go around. Doesn't necessarily go to the counties, but the counties themselves will have a preferential treatment of finding projects they like. Outside of that, the Triumph Gulf Coast will get to pick the remaining projects within Northwest Florida, within the 8 counties. So that was kind of exciting for me. So I think it's a big win for our district, for our area, to come back with that. Outside of that, we passed $1.3 billion in tax cuts, which I thought was another good year for Tallahassee to pass that along. We have a homestead exemption, and again, I communicated with Ms. Lejeune on that. In the city of Destin, there is a little bit of a trim that the city would be affected by it, but it's a $25,000 homestead exemption increase for homes valued $100,000 to $125,000. So we passed that, which is good. So that's going to save about $600 million statewide in taxes. We also, from the education perspective, the rollback, our required local effort, we rolled that back another $515 million. So that's another tax savings. I mean, of course, as we know, if your tax rate stays the same and the property values go up, you do have a tax increase, although it's not really a tax rate increase, it's just because your property values went up. You know that. But we rolled the rate back, which I know y'all have done on this council as well for Destin homeowners, but that's another $515 million that will save statewide. In addition, we had passed a $180 million tax cut that includes, among other things, it's a starting point, it's not great, but the commercial lease tax. Florida is the only state in the country that still has one. And so I was hoping we have a bigger cut for that, but we cut it 0.2% from 6 to 5.8. That'll start July 1st as well. So it's a starting point. Then we had a hurricane preparedness sales tax holiday, of course, back to school sales tax holiday. I had a Veterans Day sales tax holiday that passed through the House and the Senate, and unfortunately they started making cuts. It got cut out, unfortunately, but did have a bill for mental health. It's not as big of a problem maybe per se in Destin, although it is a problem. Okaloosa County, we're the #1 county of need in Northwest Florida for mental health. And so I was thankful to have that bill go through the House, also through the Senate. It's actually with the governor now. Hopefully he'll sign it, and we can move forward for that. We went back for special session, I guess it was a week and a half ago now, and I'm very thankful we did, because one of the problems that we had with Visit Florida, which, as y'all know, tourism is our #1 industry in Destin, so we got to make sure that stays in the forefront. When I went over there, one of the things that I struggled with was when you get there, and I went there as a former mayor and also worked with Visit Florida, I thought Visit Florida kind of hung the moon in the world of tourism. But when I got over there and kind of saw how things were done internally with that, I was a little disheartened. And so when I voted for that bill, I voted to support transparency and accountability, because I felt like they got a little wayward with some of their money. And a lot of stuff we experienced firsthand here with Okaloosa County when we had the BP money coming in. I saw the similar traits over there. And so I felt if you build a solid foundation, then I think they could get all the money they deserve to fulfill their vision and mission. Just build a great foundation so you remove question marks. So I was glad that we passed a bill for accountability and transparency. We got called back to give them the monies they rightfully deserve with that in mind. So we passed that, so they'll get $76 million again, which I'm glad. Enterprise Florida is another big issue we have here, only because of competition with Alabama, Georgia, they write checks left and right. But again, from an accountability transparency standpoint, when I went over there, I felt Enterprise Florida probably needed a little more help than Visit Florida. But I was glad we passed another reform issue with them. And instead of giving Governor Scott a quick action close fund, we gave him an enterprise jobs fund, which is essentially $85 million, again, where Destin could benefit from, is for infrastructure and workforce development. And so I think those are another opportunities that we would have as a city to participate in that. So I was happy with that. We also passed education funding up. Mr. Destin, I'm sure your dad would be happy on that one, from $24 a student up to $100 a student. So I'm glad we moved that back up to where I felt it should go. And then we also included medical marijuana, that bill, because instead of having Department of Health do it, I'm glad that we did it. We did allow cities. There are several bills that preempted cities this year, but I was glad on that. They allow cities and counties to establish a moratorium if they like, or forbid them if they want to. We empowered cities to make those decisions based on the culture of that community. And so that's up to this city as to what y'all would decide to do with the medical marijuana dispensaries, but at least that's passed. We also limited the type, smoking's not allowed in that. So we kind of made it so it's probably one of the tightest medical marijuana bills in the country. It does allow access, which is what the 71% passed, is having access to it, and I believe we honored all of that. So with that, Mayor Fisher, I know it went a little long, I apologize, but if there's any questions, I'm honored to ask them, but that's just a quick update from this year in Tallahassee.
Thank you very much. I didn't really mean to cut you off too.
No,
I
think
I do want to add one thing.
Sure.
From my first meeting with the League of Cities, I realized it seemed like the legislature was targeting the ability of cities to govern. Mm-hmm. It was, I'm not going to go through the long list of bills that were proposed that would have greatly restricted the city of Destin in managing their responsibilities, but almost immediately I was a hero at the League of Cities, because they said, you know Representative Mel Ponder?
Well, I hope I didn't get you in trouble.
But the League of Cities really needed some strong support, and having a new ex-mayor sitting in the legislature gave us all encouragement. And I'm not going to go through the laundry list, but Representative Ponder greatly helped, along with a few others, allowed Destin and all the cities in the state of Florida to continue to be able to manage their duties, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank
Mayor.
you very much. It was excellent.
Yeah, of course, thank
You
you.
did a great job this year.
Thanks. We'll feel lots confident next year. First year's good.
Comments
though.
by council?
Any questions?
Just want to say thank you. Thanks for all that you do.
Thanks, Mr. Brady. Thank you, Mr. Brady. Appreciate it.
We're very proud to have you up there.
Thank you.
We'll
Thanks
be
for your
calling you again.
time. Please do. Come see me again. Thanks.
Let's see, we have a report from the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office on spring break. Who's presenting? You've got it.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Ms. Lejeune. I am glad to say that we had a very safe and very productive spring break. Our numbers were up again, obviously. We could see that by the people that were in town. However, our criminal activity was pretty much kept to the usual spring break activity, alcohol-related incidences, pretty much. We had one assault reported, and one battery, but we didn't have any sexual batteries reported as part of spring break, which was good news for us. We did a lot of, the sheriff did what we did last year. We sent out letters to colleges letting them know that we were going to take another zero tolerance approach to spring break. Hoping, and which it did, we had several compliments by people that were here visiting that they were glad that we have a zero tolerance approach. That's why they came and brought their families, so that was good that we got that out. We did have some colleges, student bodies call the sheriff's office and get information about how we were going to conduct our business during spring break, what we would tolerate and what we wouldn't tolerate. So with the amount of people that we dealt with and the number of citizen contacts that we had, we didn't have any complaints, officer complaints throughout the entire spring break. I believe we had one gentleman called to complain that his daughter was arrested because she was underage and in possession of alcohol, but that was the only complaint we had. This is the booking van, and these are some that didn't pay attention to what we were talking about. This is one of the rooms where they were having a big party. And you can see, I've put some photos in here just to give you guys an idea of what we were dealing with. You can see the alcohol up there, and it varies from, if you named any alcohol right now, it's probably on that counter. That's a lot of money. But bad things happen when all that stuff's consumed, so that's why we have a zero tolerance approach. This guy right here made national news. Speeding down the interstate with drugs in his vehicle and all that beer coming down here for spring break. This is a poor picture because of the lighting, and it's the reason why I put this in this presentation is there's 300 kids on the beach right there. Estimated 250 to 300 kids, or spring breakers, if you will. And the problem is if they're not policed, that becomes a serious problem. So that's why we police them. That is not what you think it is. However, there's a story behind this gentleman. He arrived in Destin. I know at first glance, yeah. Councilman Dixon, I apologize for that. At first, when they showed me this, I thought the same thing. But this gentleman has a story. He came here to make memories, and he did. He was arrested within probably the first 24 hours that he was here. He was arrested at 11 o'clock at night. He was taken to the county jail. He was processed. He was released around 2 a.m. He started drinking again at 7, and he was arrested again at 10 o'clock in the morning. We believe that the zero tolerance approach, again, basically, it provides a safer environment, obviously, for not only our residents, but the people that come here and visit. And this is the area of coverage. A lot of people get confused. Sometimes the public doesn't understand what the area of coverage is. But all of Okaloosa Island at the top there in 24, that's Okaloosa Island. And then at the bottom, what is considered Destin for the sheriff's office for the city limits is zones 25 and 27. You can see the arrest by the arrest numbers, and I'll show you some more here in this presentation. Zone 27, which again is just south of where we're at right now, and then towards the county line. You can see where our problem is. We had 302 people arrested, whether they were issued an NTA under the age of 18 or they were physically arrested and transported to the county jail. Again, if it's not policed, it becomes a serious problem. I broke it down a little bit by state, just at a glance to give you an idea of the numbers. The city manager and I were told several times before spring break started that spring break was only going to be 5 weeks long. Spring break was exactly 7 weeks long, and that's why our numbers are up a little bit. So here's a little bit of a breakdown. You had 417 underage possession that were 18 years or older. 91 of those were underage, and if people are thinking that we're throwing handcuffs under the underage and putting them in the booking van and taking them to the north end of the county, we're not. We call for a parent or the guardian, whoever they're here with, to come pick them up. Along with that comes obviously the narcotics. We had 22 narcotics arrests, paraphernalia. We did have a couple, two young men who were not in college that wound up on Noriega Point, and they were soliciting spring breakers to buy dope and to buy drugs from them while they were actually sitting there smoking illegal narcotics. So they got arrested and their boat got towed. And you can see the figures from 2015, and you can see the figures from 2016. Now, 2016 was the shorter spring break, obviously. And from 2016 to 2017, we had an increase, obviously, because it was longer. I know everybody was wondering what the overtime costs were. I've had an opportunity one year to try to project based on the numbers that we had the year before. So I projected about 146, and we actually spent what we projected last year, about 107 or 107. Last year we used about 79% of what was allocated for us to use, and this year we used about 73.5%. Give you an idea what our partners are doing. Just to the east of us, I didn't get a breakdown from Walton County, but they had 680 spring break related arrests. And then Panama City Beach, who has no alcohol, period, during the month of March, that's what they wound up with as part of their numbers for spring break. Now if we go west, this is what Orange Beach did. And I won't read them all to you, but you can see that they had last year, if you remember Captain Paco giving this briefing, they had like a 433% or a 333% increase in arrests because they were not prepared for the amount of people that they had come into town. They were a little overwhelmed. This year it went down a little bit. And there's the expenditure breakdown. The 2,576 and a half hours, these shifts that are put together are supervised by sergeants. So there's a sergeant on each shift. So if you have a rain out day, you don't have people just sitting in cars waiting for something to happen. Those people get sent home. So anybody that, or if it's a predicting it's going to be pretty nasty out, we didn't have those people come out. So that's the breakdown. The total cost was $107,311.23. TDD had already negotiated and put up $25,000, and the city of Destin was $49,386.74, and Okaloosa County, as part of the 60/40 agreement that they had, was $32,924.49. And that's pretty much all I have. I'll take any questions if you have any questions. Yes, sir.
Councilmember Dixon?
The arrest numbers that you gave, the statistics for the area here, was it for just Destin or Destin and Okaloosa Island?
Destin and Okaloosa Island.
Okay, so part of those arrests, that whatever that was, 400 and something, part of those were on Okaloosa Island?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion, questions? Councilmember Rapsel?
I missed one of the numbers, if you wouldn't mind. You had listed the 7-week. Zone 27 had 302 arrests. Zone 25 had 121. What was the third one, which I guess was that unincorporated area?
Yes, ma'am.
85. That's interesting, because isn't that all completely off in the neighborhood?
Which one?
Zone 20.
27?
4 and 6. 24, 26. Go back one slide. Well, 26 is all the unincorporated area north.
Everything north of 290 Emerald Coast Parkway.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and great job.
Thank you. Good job. Thank you.
Ray, do we have any blue cards? This public comment section, anyone that?
No blue cards.
No comments. Okay, thank you. Ms. Lejeune, City Manager report?
Sorry. Okay, so we had put out an RFP for residential and commercial solid waste services. We are currently within a one-year extension of a 5-year franchise agreement with Waste Management, and this extension will expire on September 30th. As you can see in the agenda backup, there is a summary of our current contracted levels, and then the asterisks in the highlighted area, those are additional services that we requested for a new contract in the RFP that we put out. On March 20th of this year, Council had asked us to release the RFP, and we have got back in the proposals. All three responses were received on June 1st. They were all within the RFP timeline. They were opened and provided to the bid committee. And then the bid committee was able to rank these three proposals based on the selection process and criteria as was written in the RFP. And you can see in your backup that we have copied in the evaluation of responses, the selection process, the evaluation methodology. This year, the criteria was weighted. The examples of questions the bid committee considered and the respondents provided was based on qualifications, experience, and performance, which was 20% of the overall score. Operations and project approach, basically the ability to provide the service, was rated at a 30% of the overall score. Public education and outreach was 10%, and cost was 40%. And it's important to note that those costs were broken down by commercial and residential. Both could have a 20% score from the overall 100%. There is a total sheet here which shows all of the rankings based on the reviewed criteria, and the total score per points. Waste Management came out as the highest ranking firm. So at this point, the staff is asking for council to authorize the city manager to negotiate a 5-year contract with Waste Management, and then bring back an ordinance and the contract to council for final approval.
Thank you. Could I ask council for a motion before we start discussion?
I'll make the recommended motion.
Please.
I move that the city council approve the bid committee rankings for RFP 17-15-PS, residential and commercial solid waste services, and authorize city manager to negotiate a 5-year exclusive franchise contract with Waste Management, Inc. of Florida, and bring back an ordinance to council for approval.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Discussion. Any comments, questions? Not seeing any, I call for the vote. Unanimous, yes. Ms. Lejeune?
Yes, sir. The next item is a request for approval for the immediate replacement of an air conditioning unit at the Destin City Library. The Public Services Department has been monitoring this unit for 5 years. 3 years ago, it was at end of life cycle and it was recommended replacement. The staff has been keeping it running for the past 3 years, but it is now time that we absolutely have to replace it. Unfortunately, the unit is custom-made for the facility, so the replacement cost is significantly higher than it would be for a normal other commercial buildings. The effect on the budget would be $16,892. It's an unbudgeted, but funding is available in our repair and replacement account. If council would approve the expenditure, then we would just need a budget amendment in order to do the air conditioning replacement.
Councilmember Ramsell?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question. What makes this unit so special that we had to have a custom-made unit made for it? And then secondly, would it be cheaper to get a regular non-custom commercial unit?
Those are both good questions. I would like Mr. David Campbell to come forward and answer those questions. One thing I can say, though, that when the building was built, the air conditioning unit was custom-made as far as the building design. So I can't speak as to why it was designed that way, but I'm sure Mr. Campbell can help explain that.
Well, actually, we have Jonathan from D&D here tonight that will be able to help us out understand why we need that unit. Jonathan, can you come up and address the council, please?
Please give your name and address when you turn the mic on. Thank you.
Jonathan Materi. The way where the unit's set up right now, we got limited space, and how the designers came out with it, we're working with very, very limited space. So the unit, how it's designed with the returning supplier, basically we got to go back with the same unit that we currently have on site.
And a commercial unit wouldn't solve that problem? I'm just asking, I don't know.
We could give you guys that option, but the amount of labor and ductwork that we would have to move, it would probably be a lot more than if we would go back with the same unit.
Okay, thank you. I'll make the motion unless there's more discussion before I do so. Okay, I move that the D&D air conditioning, heating, and electrical services be approved to replace the HVAC unit at the Destin Library in the amount of $16,892 and make the appropriate budget amendment.
Have a motion, we have a second. Councilmember Braden?
Thank you, Mayor. I had a quick question, maybe Dave, you can answer it. Basically that building was built around the AC unit, or built, the way it was framed and built, that AC unit has to go back in there?
That's correct. The space is limited. Any other unit, we would have to make other provisions, and it's not cost effective.
To put a self-contained unit outside and reduct it?
Right.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Dixon?
I was going to make the motion, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? I have a motion. I have a second. Call for the vote. Unanimous. Yes. We'll move to our public hearings section. Begin with ordinance 1713-CN, amendment to the tree cutting moratorium. Mr. Barnes, by title.
I'm going to borrow Ms. Copp's eyes tonight, Mayor. My prescription, I'm still waiting to get my new glasses, and so I'm going to let her read these tonight. So.
Thank you.
Ordinance 1713-CN, an ordinance amending the temporary moratorium on the removal of protected trees within the Destin city limits pending consideration of changes to city ordinances, providing definitions, providing for a temporary moratorium on permits allowing removal of certain trees, providing for exceptions, providing for appeals, providing for penalties, and providing for an effective date and term.
Ms. Lejeune, explanation.
Yes, sir. This particular ordinance is being amended to remove an exemption allowing the removal of any tree from a homesteaded single property occupied by the owner. It also adds an additional southern magnolia to the protected tree species. This is the same ordinance that the council approved on first reading. There's been no changes.
Thank you. Councilmember Dixon.
Yes, I was going to make the recommended motion. I move that City Council approve proposed ordinance 17-13-CN on second reading.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any further discussion?
Mayor, it's a public hearing, so.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
You have to,
Is there any member of the public that would like to speak on this item? Not seeing anyone. I'll call for the vote. Unanimous, yes. Second reading for ordinance 17-14-CC, metered parking and enforcement. Mr. Burns.
I'm going to pass this one to Ms. Cobb, too. So.
An ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida relating to public parking, amending Section 19.5-54, other prohibited parking, amending Section 19.5-55, liability for fines and towing fees, amending Section 19.5-56, penalty for violations, providing for incorporation into the Code of Ordinances, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Ms. Lejeune.
Yes, sir. This ordinance revises those sections of the Code of Ordinances which pertain to public parking lots, liability for fines and towing fees, and penalties for violations and non-payment. It provides clarification of the expectation of payment for paid parking lots and for violations and enforcement. There have been no changes to this ordinance since first reading, and Mr. Schmidt can answer any questions that the council may have.
Councilmember Foreman.
I'd like to make the recommended motion. I move the City Council approve ordinance number 17-14-CC on second reading.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, Mayor.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any further discussion?
I have one quick question. Since we're talking enforcement, how are we going to be enforcing this?
This allows us to either enforce it in-house with a certified code enforcement officer, or it allows the sheriff's office to enforce it on our behalf. And we're still working on a program possibly to do it through the parking provider, the Passport.
Councilmember Dixon.
Yeah, I can't support this tonight. I think my objections were voiced last meeting, that basically I think we're just running down a rabbit hole with this thing, and this is not going to work. So, I think we're enacting things that we're going to have to undo somewhere down the road, and I just don't think it's going to work in that particular location. But, I will have to vote no on this tonight. Thank you.
I see no further discussion.
Public discussion, Mayor.
Public discussion, sorry. Any member of the public like to speak on this item? Public's too quiet tonight. I'm skipping you. I see no further discussion by council. I'll call for the vote. Two noes, 5 yes, passes. Second reading of ordinance 17-17-CN, extension of temporary moratorium on medical marijuana, and that sounds like a land use.
An ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, extending a temporary moratorium on growing, cultivation, processing, manufacturing, dispensing, distribution, and wholesale and retail sale of medical cannabis, low THC cannabis, and derivative products, or any related activities. Extending a temporary moratorium on the opening, relocation, or expansion of any medical marijuana dispensing facility within the city limits, providing for penalties, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Ms. Lejeune?
Yes, sir. We had brought this forward to council originally for a temporary moratorium in order to wait for the state to enact regulatory framework for which the city could then follow suit and enact regulations for businesses that wanted to come into the city. Our moratorium was going to expire by July 1st, so that's why we had asked that we do an extension of the moratorium. We do have good news, though, as Representative Ponder had stated, during the special legislative session, they were able to address the medical cannabis regulatory framework, and they have now wrote that into a bill. By extending this moratorium, this now gives staff the time that we need to go ahead and create the ordinance that establishes the regulations for businesses to then operate in the city of Destin within the statutory framework. So we would ask that you would approve this on second reading so that staff then can get to work with enacting regulations so that we can allow the businesses into the city of Destin.
Thank you. Would any member of the public like to comment on this item? Not seeing anyone. Councilmember Foreman.
Yes, Mayor, I lost my place on here, but I'd like to make the recommended motion. I got the wrong set of glasses on is what happened. Oh, yes. I move that council approve the attached ordinance 17-17-CN on second reading. Thank you.
Do I have a second? I have a motion. I have a second. Any further discussion? Questions? If not, I call for the vote. 2 no, 5 yes. Excuse me, 6 yes. 5. Yeah, 5 yes. It's going too smooth tonight, huh? Consent agenda. We moved 7, 8, and have already dealt with that. And we have pulled 7E, approval of citizens' request for no parking signs on... No.
C, I believe.
C, excuse me. Resolution 1734, the metered parking fee. We'll go ahead and discuss that now, if that's...
Actually, Mayor, I would vote on the rest of the consent agenda first,
Okay.
and then discuss 7C after.
Mayor, I move to adopt the consent agenda in whole with the exception of 7C.
I have a motion, I have a second. Any discussion? If not, I call for the vote. Unanimous, yes. Resolution 1734, metered parking. Do we need to read that by title? No, okay. Discussion, questions by council? Karen?
I just, if Ms. Lejeune will explain a little bit better for the audience more than anything else of how the fee structure is going to be.
Yes, sir. So we have the Marlar parking lot, which is metered for paid parking. And during the beginning of the summer season, we had several business owners from the Harbor District ask if the city would be willing to enter into an agreement to provide parking for their employees at a discounted rate. Mr. Schmidt contacted Passport, who runs the system for us, and he crunched the numbers, and we are able to provide this service at a discounted rate. It will not be any additional cost to the city, and we will still be able to, cover all of our expenses at the same time and provide a service for the businesses on the harbor. We are able to discount it at half of what the normal rate would be. The business owner would be required to pay for the parking upfront at a minimum of $1,000. They could put more in it, and then we will work out the system by which their employees will be able to utilize the parking lot.
Okay, the $1,000 is the flat, basically a flat fee that they'll all pay, and then as we discussed earlier, you said that then they would still have to use the app.
The $1,000 is a minimum flat fee, yes, sir. They can pay more if they want more parking. You know, some businesses have 10 employees, some have 100. So they could put in as much as they wanted in advance, a minimum flat fee of $1,000, and then they will utilize the app, the employees will, to designate their parking days and times.
Okay. All right. That was the question I had.
Councilmember Braden?
Thank you, Mayor. Do we have an allocated number of parking places we're going to do this with, and I'm just not seeing it?
No, sir. It's on a first-come, first-served basis.
So if one commercial business wants to lease the whole parking lot, they can do that?
If they're willing to pay for it,
Pay for
yes,
it.
sir.
And we're not, I mean, if they lease half the parking lot, we're not gonna have anybody out there that's stopping somebody from parking, public parking in there because somebody's paid for parking lot, for parking places.
Actually, based on past use, we don't foresee that issue. When it was free and during spring break, we didn't see that kind of use from the businesses, even though quite a few of them were using the parking for their employees, but they were shifts. So rather than all 146 spaces being utilized at once, it was significantly less than that. So we really anticipate that, except for peak times like the 4th of July, we won't see the parking lot absolutely full generally, but it should dramatically increase the use.
But the individuals know we're not gonna guarantee them. If they need 25, we can't guarantee 25.
That's correct. It's basically still on a first-come, first-served basis. If the public gets there first, then the spaces aren't going to be available for the businesses. Also, I want to clarify that the money that's paid up front from the business is still basically addressed in what they call a wallet. Basically, a wallet is something that if you were a tourist and you were planning to go to the harbor a number of nights, rather than doing one transaction for each night, you could essentially use one transaction, put $10 in your wallet, and then you're basically paying down that wallet until it's expired. It's extinguished through your multiple uses. This system is very similar to that, but the difference is that they will pay us directly in advance. We'll notify Passport of that amount. Passport sets up a dummy wallet in their name, and then they just basically utilize it until it's used up. At which point, we'll notify them that they need to add more to their wallet, or they won't be able to park there.
Now, what percentage do they take of that?
It's the same amount. Basically, they take a 25-cent, what they call a convenience fee for each parking event. And then when for those users that are using credit cards, we use their gateway, and there's a 35-cent, it's 2.6% of the total transaction, plus a 35-cent fee and a 5-cent gateway fee to Passport. Through this process, we won't be using the credit card, so that gateway fee won't be there, but we'll still pay a 25-cent convenience fee for each parking event, and the 5-cent, basically it's like a wallet fee per transaction. So the transaction will cost us, for the businesses, it'll only cost us 30 cents.
Thank you.
Councilmember Marler?
Obviously, if we pass this tonight, it'll take effect like tomorrow.
The businesses are going to have to coordinate. First off, they're going to have to pay us up front,
right,
and coordinate with Passport, because the way the system works, they're going to get a separate special zone number. And that's not to say that they're going to have allocated parking spaces. It's a way for us to differentiate between the business and basically allocate the amounts to their wallet. So they'll have a specialized number that they'll use instead of the regular zone number, and that allows Passport to keep track of it. We'll be able to follow up on that and basically look at the reports on a regular basis, and each of those business owners will also be able to tap in and look at the reports on their usage. So it's a very transparent process.
And how many business owners do we know that were inquiring about this?
We know of about three or four right now that will probably avail themselves of it, but there may be more. We don't know exactly yet how many there may participate.
Okay, all right.
Did I get a motion on this?
Not yet, but I'll be glad to make the recommended
Please.
motion. I move the City Council approve resolution number 17-34 and direct staff to implement the program as noted in the resolution.
I have a motion, I have a second. Councilmember Ramsell, were you going to make a motion? No. Come ahead.
Okay, so I'm a little bit conflicted on this because I see positives and I see a few negatives, and it comes back to public parking. If we enter into such an agreement, are we providing public parking? Well, I guess yes, in a way we are, but is it the intended public parking that it was designed for? I don't know, and it's almost like we're furnishing the property that someone else doesn't have. So logically and economically it makes sense. And I haven't heard anything from anyone, so I'm just going to end up going with my gut on this. But I do have one question. What happens if the lot starts to become regularly full? Can we rescind the agreement that we might have with these folks in order to create the space that might be needed for public? And can we do that at any time, or is it a certain day's notice?
I mean, you would need to allow the people to utilize the money that they paid into the system first, and then you could, by ordinance, change it if you want the program, because there's by resolution, because you've passed a resolution allowing the program, and then the city manager also would have some administrative authority maybe to suspend the program if directed to do so. But if someone's paid money into the system, it would not be advisable to cut them off if they.
But would there be a contract in place that would stipulate we need to give them 30 days notice or something before cutting off their parking? It would just be pay as you go.
Mr. Smith's more familiar with the terms of that contract, but I don't believe it's not that type of contract. It's more of like a pay as you use type of contract. So.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Marler?
I guess to answer the question, it ain't getting used now. At least we're going to make some money off the deal with the businesses, because if it's still a public parking lot, the businesses are public taxpayers as well as some of the employees that might park there. But I know Mr. Dixon and I both have seen it when there was a car, a boat, and a Sea-Doo, and that was the only thing in the parking lot. And that's pretty much a car right now is about all that's in the parking lot right now. And we're not getting any money really from anything. So this is a way at least to get some somebody to park there at least, and that might entice other people to park there, but under the system we got right now, it ain't working.
Councilmember Dixon.
I'm going to vote no on this because I don't have a problem with the fact that we're trying to do something to assist the businesses in the fact that we've started this program, but, it's not because of that. It's just the fact that I just don't agree with it. But my line of thinking is just in case this thing does become popular, which I can't see it happening, that we wouldn't lease out more than 50% of what's available there. In other words, if there's, I don't know how many parking spots there are there, but,
I think it's 147.
all right, then I would possibly look at doing 50% of that. And, the fact is that the way we've got it set up is not going to be utilized other than probably for the people that are working at the local establishments or whatever it may be, and this is probably the only shot we got at making any money on this. One of the things that I'd like to know is, or I'd like to ask and request is that, and we're talking about this, so I guess I can ask this during this time, is that we get some sort of a number as to how much money has been brought in on that parking garage by the next meeting in July, if that would be possible. Huh? I'm talking about in July. I want to know how much money has been made with that by that time, if you would, please.
Yes, sir. By July 17th?
Yes.
Yes, sir. We will bring those statistics to you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Foreman.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we're thinking too narrowly on this. You're focused entirely on the Marlar parking lot. When you're looking at a list of people who want no parking signs out in Crystal Beach, where that's the right-of-way, and that rather than enforcing a no parking spot, we could enforce a parking spot. So, I mean, the point is we need to look at every available piece of property that we own or that we can potentially use and try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work and it goes away. But any businessman, and there are a few of those here, knows that every once in a while you have to take a step forward in order to make money. And I think this is one way you can do it, at least find out, because not every other city, but many, many cities in the United States do exactly this. This software package that he's got wasn't invented just for us.
May I respond?
Councilmember Dixon, go ahead.
I don't have a problem with paid parking in the city. The problem I have is with the paid parking at that particular lot, and that's what's mentioned in here. Although it does say with the money we could use it to form other parking areas. Exactly. But this is designed for Marlar Street parking.
Councilmember Ramsell.
If I recall correctly, at our past council meeting when we discussed this, we'd asked staff and city manager to look into other potential locations. Do y'all recall that?
Yes, absolutely. And we are still trying to get to the point where we can work on our transportation master plan. I mean, right now, I could tell you some of the ideas that we've kicked around, but there's other opportunities for paid parking. For example, some of the side streets off of Highway 98. If we direct traffic one way off of some of those side streets, then we would have enough to put parking on both sides of the street, and those could be metered for paid parking. There's the lot, excuse me, that we have down below the community center that could be improved, and we could stripe and meter that parking as well. If you recall, when we brought this forward, this was as a beta test because paid parking was not something that the council had wanted to adopt in previous reiterations. I believe that Mr. Schmidt, before I got here, had brought paid parking to the council maybe 3 times maybe not necessarily this exact council, but all 3 times it had been shot down. So having the ability to do this beta test with the Marlar Park was the first time we were able to test paid parking in the city. I do recall that some of the complaints about the parking at Marlar is that it was all of the workers, employees from the surrounding businesses that were parking at Marlar. So this is actually makes sense because now we're asking those employees to pay.
Excellent. I just keep going back to, it seems like old 98 through Crystal Beach from Matthew all the way down is ideal for parallel parking metered, and Restaurant Row as well, perhaps. So.
Restaurant Row is actually something that we will be bringing back. We were directed by council to look at that in the next budget year when Silver Shells came in and they wanted to do it, and council said, well, why can't we do it? We'll be bringing that back in the next budget for you to look at and approve as a major project in the coming year. If council wants us to look at some of the right-of-ways down in the Crystal Beach area, we can start looking at that as well, if that's a desire of the entire council.
I mean, I think that's a great idea because they're already parking in the grass, on the gravel. I mean, it's now gravel, but at one point it was grass, and it's now dirt and sand. Others are gravel because people have made it parking spots. They're using our right-of-way whether we wanted them to or not. So it seems logical.
And I don't disagree with you at all. What I would ask is if council would want to make the motion to direct me to look into that, only because I'm not confident that the residents of Crystal Beach, that they would be amenable to this, but if the council directs us to look at it, then we will absolutely bring back a rough analysis of where we could put metered parking in the Crystal Beach neighborhood.
I mean, I'll make a motion if you need one. I don't know how I go with consensus, but.
Yeah, let's deal with the first motion, and then we'll come back to the second, but that one would not be on the agenda. Councilmember Destin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. To Mr. Dixon's point about it being potentially only doing half, it's all just a first come, first served basis. We're not leasing any portions of the property to anybody. So technically we could have all the businesses pay up front and their employees could get there. But like Mr. Schmidt was saying, if the public has already gotten there first, then they just don't get to park there that day. And all that money is just held in a wallet. So I hope we get to that point where we have that problem. And additionally, we're looking at some numbers that are getting to the point of being pretty livable for most of these employees who are going to utilize this on an 8-hour, 50 cents the first hour. If you have an 8-hour shift, that's $2.25. That's not that bad.
Councilmember Morgan.
We were doing so well.
We're keeping good pace.
So I think just what I was going to note, anybody that was at that workshop, the beach workshop on Monday, or if you talk to anyone at the community center about their parking, and if you truly want to generate revenue for the city of Destin to increase our parking, including a potential lot that's next to the parking lot down there, that's a parking lot we need to look at. Whether or not we do it, I don't know, but that parking lot is very, very, very utilized, and we're talking about a parking lot, the Marlar Street parking lot, that is not. So if you really want to generate revenue for parking improvements, to earmark it for parking improvements in the city, that's where you do it. And then in terms of the Crystal Beach parking, it's a mess. I understand there's a few spots on Old 98 that I think metered parking would work, but if we're talking about parking on the right-of-way where we're getting requests for no parking signs right now, they're going to waste their time putting that together because Crystal Beach is going to come out in full force, scream at us, and we're not going to vote for it. So,
Councilmember Destin.
Yeah, I echo Mr. Morgan's sentiments about the usage and the primary spots where we should probably be looking to invest in doing some metered parking. But I do say that if we go with the the areas over on Cybert, we've got to be real serious about what we're doing with the right-of-way over there, because Thursday nights, Tuesday nights, any of the holiday weekends, we've got folks in the right-of-way going down Cybert and Calhoun all the way past the library. And as soon as we put metered parking in those parking lots, they're just not going to use them. They're just going to park down the right-of-way even further down into those neighborhoods. And so that's something we need to keep in mind as we move forward, because these folks are doing it because it's free. And so they're going to have to be sort of cajoled into actually paying. And if it's a de minimis amount, like a $225 for an 8-hour shift, that's not so bad.
I have a motion. Councilmember Ramswell.
I have a question for city manager. Where do we stand in terms of of enabling tow truck drivers to actually tow? I know there was some back and forth on whether they could, whatever. Where do we stand on that?
For the paid parking, you just enacted that ordinance tonight.
No, I mean generally throughout the city. If they're parked somewhere they shouldn't be parked.
You're referring to the roaming tow trucks?
Correct.
That was deemed undesirable in our conversations with the sheriff's office. We can bring back a formal report on that if the council so desires, but in our conversations with the sheriff's office, it made more sense to be able to have no parking tow-away signs in specific areas, rather than allow tow trucks to roam the city and pick up cars in the right-of-way. But if that's a desire of council, then I just need that direction from council, and we'll research that more and bring back a report.
People are going to feel it a whole lot more if they come out and their car's gone, rather than if they get a ticket that they're going to wad up and throw away because they don't live here. Just my thought.
I would like to bring back a formal report if the council is interested in this, only to be able to delineate all of the challenges that were discussed with the sheriff's office.
I might remind council that I was requested at the last meeting to try to keep these a little bit shorter. We're down into speaking to 4 and 5 times per council member in a few cases. I just wish to remind council of that. And we're getting a little bit off course on the specific meter parking lot, but go ahead, Mr. Marler.
Just one quick thing. I can't remember what year we did it, but we passed an ordinance on towing in the city, and the tow trucks all have to be headquartered in the city, and they also have to have a storage facility within the city so that the customer doesn't have to drive all the way to Fort Walton or Niceville. But we do have an ordinance.
That's for private property.
No, it was for anything, car accidents, towing off of private property. They had to be, we have an ordinance that they have to be in the city of Destin or within, they could happen over on Commons, but they have to be within a certain distance within the city, or within for a mile or two for storage.
I'd like to call for the question. Six yes, 1 no, passes.
You want to be the parking meter attendant?
By the way, the parking meter attendant helped me a great deal when I utilized the city parking lot. There was a city staffer on the lot. I couldn't use the parking went very well, I just couldn't use my telephone was the problem. But they are on at least for the blessing of the fleet, we had staff on the lot explaining to people how to utilize it and writing tickets.
Mayor,
let's take a 5-minute.
did we need to make an alternate motion to enable her to look at making that other lot pay?
If y'all want to do an alternate motion, you'll have to actually, do 2 motions, one to set aside the order of the day and then vote on it. But yeah, if y'all want to do that, that would.
Actually, this was mentioned in the last discussion item, so I don't know why we need to, it was, I think if she just makes a motion, that should be good enough, because the money was supposed to go towards trying to find parking or to start a parking program in Crystal Beach. So
Let's just make certain to do it right. Could I have a motion to set the agenda aside for this?
Well, and if I could just maybe clarify this, we are looking at the restaurant row. That was one of the items that were specifically mentioned, and I just reported we'll be looking at it budget. The other area that was specifically mentioned was the Crystal Beach neighborhood. If council wants us to now, at this time, do the analysis for metered paid parking in Crystal Beach, then that is something that I need to now put on our, for lack of a better word, to-do list. And I need to make sure that all the council is in agreement that this is now going to be a project I'm going to assign to staff, which will take their resources away from something else on the to-do list. So that's the only reason that I'm asking if we're specifically doing a parking analysis now for Crystal Beach neighborhood. I just need to know that the entire council, or at least the majority of the council, is in agreement that they want me to utilize staff resources to do this.
Consensus would
I'll make a
work
motion
for
to
this?
set aside the order of the day.
We have a motion, have a second. All those in favor? The agenda has been set aside. Do I have another motion?
Do we need a motion to look at the park? Because you mentioned Crystal Beach and you mentioned Restaurant Row. What about the other parking lot to the west, northwest, or whatever that direction that is from the community center that Councilman Morgan and some others discussed?
Okay, and again, just to clarify, we will be in our transportation master planning looking at the potential for parking throughout the city. If the council does not want to wait for that master planning to happen and you want me to look at specific parking analysis now, then I would ask that you be specific as to what areas you now want us to do the parking analysis for. So if it's Crystal Beach and the parking lot down by the community center, I would ask for that direction, because it is our plan to look at parking citywide when we do the transportation master planning. But if it's important to do those two, or if you have a third site, if you want that done now, then that's what I'm asking for direction.
I would make the motion that we look at Restaurant Row and the parking lot down by the community center now. We can hold off on Crystal Beach.
We have a motion. We have a second. Go ahead, Mr. Foreman.
I got a question. How much analysis are we talking about? I mean, this is a test program, and we want to see if there are cars parked there now that we could. The analysis, I think, would be, can you mark them?
Each one of those lots has unique issues.
Okay.
For instance, at the community center, that's an undeveloped lot. We've got to figure out a way, rather than pave it and stripe it and number the parking spaces, we might end up having just to delineate parking spaces somehow and put up numbered signs. But we've got to figure out how to identify those parking spaces.
So the analysis we're talking about would be the cost of doing that, basically.
Yes, that's part of it. And, the most feasible plan for utilizing a pay-for-parking system there. At Restaurant Row, it's complicated in that, first off, the striping there is really aged. We're going to have to restripe it, number it, and it's further complicated by the fact that we have some joint use parking down there that's actually utilized by both the city and the businesses. And so we'll probably be constrained from charging for those spaces. So we'll have kind of a blend of paid parking spaces and non-paid parking spaces, which is something we just need to kind of get our minds around.
A follow-up question on this is, could it be done gradually until the master plan is done? Could we just look at these in segments and perhaps use some priority to do them and that sort of thing as opposed to doing a citywide analysis.
And that's what I believe this motion will do, sir, is set the priorities that you want staff to look at this. And again, there are multiple considerations. We will do this, but it is going to take staff to go out, to look at the areas, to take into consideration, and I have no clue everything that goes on. I'm sure that Mr. Campbell can better reiterate, but there's a lot of things that we need to look at, including what Mr. Schmidt just relayed, as to, before we just go in there, throw down some asphalt and make some stripes. So I'm happy to do exactly what you're saying. And in my mind, that's what we're doing tonight. You're setting the priorities for us to now go look at the lot by the community center and Restaurant Row.
Mayor, just to follow up on that, this is not a make-work type thing. We're discussing it as a concept. And I definitely don't want you to task the staff to do something which is going to push something else to the bottom of the heap or anything like that. Do we have consultants that do this that we could tap to pay so much money to go out and do and give us the answer that way?
I absolutely know that I could find a consultant to do this, sir, but it's an unbudgeted item.
Okay.
I would have to consult with Mr. Farmer to see if we even have any money left for consulting services, but if we do, I could absolutely, we have RPG under contract right now. I'm sure for an additional fee, they would be happy to do this work for us.
Is there any further discussion? Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mayor. I think we have and the staff has bigger fish to fry than dealing with this. It's something we need to look at, but I think we need to push it on back and look at it later down the road. We need to get our Chapter 1 and a comp plan. And we need to keep focusing on there's things that we need to finish. Staff's got a plate full. And like Mr. Destin said, you go down there and start charging people in that parking lot on Cybert by the community center. I ain't parking there. I'm going to park in the grass down the right of way. And that's what everybody else is going to do. We're going to push them in the neighborhoods and push them out on the street. And that's not what we want. So we need to get a little bit better plan together before we start doing that and start giving staff more tasks. And, you know, to me, it's just not worth it right now. We got other things we need to finish. That's all I have.
I see no further discussion. If not, I'll call for the question. Motion fails. 2 yes, 5 no's. We'll take a 10-minute break and resume at 20 till. everyone to return to their seats. Going to start it back up just a little earlier than I said. I'll call the meeting back to order, please. Okay. Councilmember Braden, would you like to lead us off?
Sure, Mayor. First, I want to nominate Tom Whitehammer for the member of the Board of Adjustments.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for Mr. Tom Weidenhammer to be named to the Board of Adjustment. Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Unanimous, yes. Mr. Braden?
Next, I have signage for the Martyr parking lot. I couldn't find it, but there is no signage for that Martyr parking lot for public parking. I know we've talked about it in the past. It's come up that there is no signage, and people don't know that that is a public parking lot. I don't know if the staff has tried it in the past. If we can't have, I know when I'm out of town, I'm looking for the big blue sign with the big white P, public parking. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for what we have, a nice, beautiful city of Destin sign with our emblem, and down at the bottom it says public parking. Is there a reason that we do not have the signs on the Highway 98 eastbound and westbound?
I had taken your concern to Mr. Campbell, and I'm going to let him respond to you, sir.
Thank you.
Councilman Braden, this is something that that we were looking at, and we actually do have, they're actually green in the state of Florida, the green sign with the white P on there and the arrows. I'm having our staff check with DOT to make sure, we understand the permitting process to get those signs up. And not only are we looking at east and westbound on US 98, but also putting some signs on Stallman and Mountain that would show our visitors where our public parking is.
Now, is that something, as far as the signage itself, I'm thinking, one sign, say, 300 yards, and then, just before the turn, there's another sign, is that something that DOT is going to tell us where they have to go?
Now, we're going to discuss that with DOT. We had, in the recent past, located two locations, one east and one west, that had a P with an arrow. And that was just before you get to the parking lot, say, 300 feet. As far as putting anything prior to that, we'll have to get with DOT and see, and discuss that, to see how we can make that happen.
I mean, that's just what I was thinking, and some of the research that I was doing, they had them like 300 feet or so, and then maybe a little further away, and then about 40 feet from the turn, there was another one pointing that direction or whatever direction it was. So, I mean, I went and looked at it, and there is no signage whatsoever on 98.
No, you're correct.
So public, they have no idea that is a public parking lot. I mean, it's, so what time frame are we looking at as far as getting with DOT and finding out what the application process would be or
tomorrow?
What time frame are we looking at as far as when an actual sign would go up? Are we looking at 30 days, 60 days? What kind of process is that?
We haven't permitted a sign on US 98 for a while. I'm not quite sure what the actual procedure is, but we'll find out tomorrow.
Okay.
Again, this was something that staff had been looking at in conjunction with our wayfinding signs for certain establishments on our north-south connector roads that some of our civic buildings to get, for instance, the American Legion or other civic buildings. So this is something that has been in progress for a while, so we have made some progress on that.
I'd put it under my name tonight because I didn't know if it was something that the council needed to make a motion on to get some signage put out there or get the ball rolling on that or what. That's the reason I put it there, but apparently we don't, so.
I think we can get this done fairly quickly.
Okay. Thank you so much. That's all I have tonight, Mayor.
You're welcome.
May I ask a question?
Go ahead.
You noted that it had been in process for quite a while. Why?
It's the wayfinding program.
Uh-huh.
And from what I understand, the wayfinding program was created way before I got here. So we do have on the books the standards for different types of wayfinding signage in the city. From what I understand, it was a budgeting issue. We have recently put into our TDD budget for signage down at the beaches, and I have asked the CRA liaison, Mr. Stephen Schmidt, to put some money in the Harbor District CRA budget, because we now have a little bit of money there, to do some wayfinding signs in the Harbor District so that we can direct people to the community center and the historical fishing museum, for example. So as we're finding the money, I'm moving the wayfinding signage program forward, but it has been low man on the totem pole as far as funding for the city. We're just now starting to move forward with it.
Now, you can probably guess what my next question is going to be. If we're directing tourists to these locations, shouldn't that be something that we ask funds from the TDC for?
I can't answer that. We're asking for the money for the beach signage, and we know that is an approved usage. They've funded it before. We partner with the TDC for that. For the other signage, like I said, we found some money in the CRA to do the Harbor District. We did not come before the TDC this budget season with requests for signage other than the beach. Whether they should be paying for it or not, that's above my pay grade.
Okay, thanks.
You still have the floor.
Okay, I wanted to see if I could get an update on Indian Bayou project.
the drainage project. We did our final walkthrough Thursday. There's still a number of items on the punch list. For instance, cleaning out the pipes that were put in and make sure that they're clear of sand. There's one or two residences that the contractor has to remove the dead sod that's there and replace it. And there's a few warranty items, as-built certifications that we're waiting on to do the final closeout.
Are they still receiving the daily penalty?
Yes.
How many days is that now? Ish.
I believe 20.
Okay, that's all I have on that topic. The other thing I just wanted to go over is we've had a lot of folks in the news lately for doing good deeds and having some really good accomplishments, and I just wanted to recognize a few. Megan Wood, who is former Councilman Jim Wood's daughter. They were here earlier, but they've left. But she actually received recognition from NASA in the form of a scholarship. She was one of a few University of Alabama students to receive that recognition in the form of a financial award. So kudos to her. I know it's extremely competitive. Also, I thought this was really amusing and really showed a sign of a good resident and someone that really cares about their community. Chandler Clark and Anthony Klein. Anthony decided that he wanted, for his birthday, the only thing he wanted to do was walk the beach, clean it up, hang out, and watch a sunset. And these are two 20-ish young men. So I just thought that was really cool that that's what they wanted to do on the friend's birthday. I also wanted to acknowledge the Destin All-Stars 9 and under. They are the district champs in baseball. And then last but definitely not least, as we talked about at the beginning of this meeting tonight, Mr. Stephen Minshall, I wanted to just give a shout out to him because he is the one that sent an email to the city council and made the recommendation for the renaming of the dog park. So I just wanted to thank him for being so aware and concerned for fellow citizens, and obviously to the mayor and the rest of the council for picking up on that. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Dixon.
Yes, tonight I'd like to nominate Mrs. Patty Trajak for membership to the Equity Study Commission for Business Tax Receipts.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any discussion? Not, I call for the question. Unanimous, yes.
And, Mr. Mayor, I have one more thing, and I debated about bringing this up, and I was going to bring this up a while back, to be honest with you. And I don't know that there's anything that we can do about it. I'm not asking for any formal action tonight or anything like that, but about once every couple of months, our city basically gets littered, what I say littered with, some form of advertisement, and I don't know even who it's by, but it's basically, it looks like newspapers that are thrown out everywhere within the city of Destin. And basically these papers are thrown out at places that people don't live at. And they basically clutter up our roadways. They lay out there for weeks or sometimes months until they're squashed and the paper is all strewn through town. And I just wondering if we could maybe find, one, where this stuff is coming from, and two, is it legal for people to go just throw that stuff out, or is that considered littering?
It would be littering. I'll leave the other question, the investigative side, up to the city manager. She thinks they had the resources to find out who it is.
I don't know if anybody else on the council has seen this, what I'm talking about, but it's basically some form of advertisement that is just, sometimes there will be two or so at each person's house. And like I said, they throw them out at homes that people hadn't lived in for years, and they lay there and lay there and lay there, and they trash up the neighborhoods for a long time. And I just don't know where they're coming from, one. And two is that, you know, if we allow this, can we just allow basically anybody to do that? And if these businesses got a competitive edge by doing that, or whatever it may be? So if you would, please check into that.
Do you have one of those flyers so we can see
They
what
are
business it is?
everywhere in Destin. You drive down the road and you'll find them
I've got
everywhere. They're
one.
not flyers, they're in bags.
I've got one.
Yeah.
The lady come through Indian Bayou about a week ago in a car with no identification on it, and she was slinging them out both windows, and they are in a little blue, waterproof, like a newspaper. It's what it is, a little bitty newspaper. It's thin, and yeah, they're everywhere. So.
Would you provide that to me, sir?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
then we'll go ahead and investigate.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Councilmember Foreman?
Thank you.
Councilmember Marner?
I have nothing tonight, Mayor.
Councilmember Destin?
Thank you, Mayor. Just one issue. I'd like to nominate Ms. Casey Waterhouse for membership to the Board of Adjustment.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any discussion? Not seeing any, I call for the question. Unanimous, yes? Did you have a second item? Okay. Councilmember Morgan?
Thank you, Mayor. I nominate Mr. Jay Roberts for the Board of Adjustment.
Do you have a second? Second. I have a motion. I have a second. Any discussion? Not, I call for the question. Mr. Marner? Unanimous, yes? I've forgotten how long ago it's been, but the council charged me with putting together a proposed noise ordinance, and I bring to you a final draft. We have discussed this thoroughly with the major stakeholders. It seemed to be the desire, it was my desire, and it seemed to be those all involved, to keep this simple, easy to understand, and as short as possible. And I think Mr. Burns has done an outstanding job of doing that. The other priority we had was that it be enforceable. This ordinance is used in many areas in the state of Florida. I guess the nearest is Panama City Beach. I don't know if Panama City also does, but Panama City Beach it certainly does. And we feel that this ordinance is enforceable, easily used by the Sheriff's Department, and it'll remove the burden from the city, proving that the noise is a nuisance and allowing the Sheriff's Department full authority to enforce. I bring this to you to ask that you give me authority to present it to City Council, to the city staff for their review, and then it'll be brought back to you for first reading.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. Any discussion? Not seeing any, I call the question. Whoop.
Oh, you didn't?
I didn't see it in here, but I know one thing that we've discussed in the past is the noise meters, whatever their proper name is, they're not measuring bass, which seems to be a certain problem. Did you address?
We've eliminated that completely. Basically, how this will function is that a citizen who can't sleep at night or whatever will call the Sheriff's Department. The Sheriff's Department will respond. The deputy will stand at a certain number of feet from where the noise is being produced. If it's commercial, primarily 300 feet, residential, say 150 feet. If he agrees that it is a nuisance, then he will cite or arrest.
So I don't mean to be difficult, but isn't that rather subjective? I mean, saying whether someone agrees or not, don't you need a more definitive legal term?
Not according to my legal advice.
It's been held constitutional by multiple appellate authorities in Florida and around the country, and that was actually the biggest issue. We took this to the Sheriff's Department's attorney, and she actually made me go do a full analysis for her on that, and then we went back and met with the sheriff and some others. The city manager was there, and so was the mayor, and they basically, the big issue was we had to draft it in such a manner would they enforce it? And they kind of made it clear to us that the sound meters are something that require so much training, and the judges have an issue understanding the science behind it, and the state attorney's office, I found out, had an issue, one and the same, to training new state attorneys, because they do churn through them pretty quick. And everyone agreed that this it's subjective, but really it's if the deputy hears a sound 150 or 300 feet, if he can hear that music coming, it's plainly audible at that point, and then it's a violation. So it is somewhat subjective. I guess if they sent someone out there who had trouble hearing, then that might be an issue. So,
The active on duty. Thank you for the clarification.
Mr. Burns, is there any provision, who's entitled to complain? Do they have to be a citizen of Destin? Can they be a business? Is any classification of person permitted to file a complaint and ask for the sheriff's office to come out?
it's basically it's also if the sheriff's deputy shows up and for any other reason and hears noises coming from an area that it necessarily wouldn't have to be complaint driven. So it's more or less it's on the books and enforceable. It could be complaint driven. You call the sheriff's department or you call code enforcement, and code enforcement basically will just turn around and call the sheriff's department to go out there.
So, any other discussion? If not, I call the question. Unanimous, yes. I'm sorry, I want to bring one more item that is not on the agenda. The storm starting to form in the Gulf reminded me of this. We have had a problem with DOs in that when they are issued, they never seem to go away. Every time there's a hurricane in the Gulf or strikes the state of Florida, the governor issues an emergency declaration, and contained in that each time is provision that DOs be extended for 2 years. We've got DOs now that have been on the books for 10 years? Am I correct on that? At least that long, if not much longer. And the reason they're still there, many of them, is simply because a hurricane was down near Miami or Key West, and our DOs were extended another 2 years. Doesn't have to be anywhere near here, doesn't have to have any effect on us, and I don't know if I can truly affect that, but I just kind of wanted to have consensus of council that I might put together a letter to the governor asking that he give some more consideration before he extends all the DOs in the state on an automatic basis, particularly in counties that would not be affected by the storm. And if there's no objections, I'll form a letter and bring it back to council.
Sounds good.
Okay. Land use?
Nothing, thank you.
City attorney?
Nothing, thank you.
Any member of the audience would like to speak on anything they would like to speak on? You're not limited. If not, I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
8 o'clock, wow.
Whoa.